This is Happy Times and Places, with me, Toby Hadoke.
Hello, I'm Darrell Maclaine. I'm a voice actor, impressionist, composer, and clown/daft bugger. My favourite Doctor Who story is The Chase from 1965.
Well, good morning. I have been set the task of watching The Chase by a man I've never met, but who has entertained me and who has decided that it would be a wheeze for me to find the best things I possibly can about a Doctor Who story that is perhaps not the most well-loved, and certainly wasn't in the early days of Hadoke Towers. But very much enjoyed episode 1. Let's see how we do with episode 2. I want you to press play in 3, 2, 1, now. It's so atmospheric, this opening title sequence. I mean, I'm probably be saying this a lot during this podcast, but I may as well say something. Never before nor since has anyone been so successfully transported through time and space in such an abstract fashion, with a beautifully rendered technique that was happened upon, by a BBC technician whiling his time away between recording sessions. Norman Taylor, I salute you, sir. I think because it's an extended music sequence, I think I had a compilation tape of a Doctor Who cassette that I'd done of music. That's a walking Dalek. Oh no, you see, I'm not. But that's a great shot. You see, that's a great shot and it's a leap from film to studio, of which we'll have an example later that somebody recently referred to on Twitter as controversial. I will weigh in with my opinion. It might be different from yours. That's fine. I always like it when the Dalek gets a different appendage. The sucker. I never have a problem with the sucker. It was an expedient and thing that worked. But I like it, and I like that sort of compassy type device. Oh yes, the Aridians, who I remember were in a lot of the early publicity. The sort of pictures that I saw before I saw the story. The Maya Beast. Ian and Vicky are doing their comedy routine whilst being threatened by tentacled monsters, which I'm not altogether sure about. That's a cracking shot, and that Dalek is moving very well on the sand, which will have, I'm sure, been really, really hard. Dalek action is what we want. Having had an episode, look at that thing, and that's quite a simple technique, but it's a really smart looking device, and I get what it is trying to be, and it fits with the Dalek. Now this is Brian Proudfoot, who in the paperwork is credited as Walk On Aridian. He sort of walk on and die. He is forever famous in my house, and should be in yours, as the first person to play Doctor Who that wasn't William Hartnell, I think, because he is the guy that walks down the poplar trees in the Reign of Terror when William Hartnell couldn't go on location, and they needed somebody to do it instead. And also, prior to this, he's had a really good on-screen role in Doctor Who as Tigellinus, the cupbearer who is poisoned by Nero and has Doctor Who's first and perhaps only, no, there's a couple, but a rare comedy death in Doctor Who, which again, serious me would reject, but it's so well done and it's so very funny. So Brian Proudfoot, who I've never found, I think is dead. I think spent some time in South Africa. I've never 100% been able to narrow it down. Whereas this is a very lachrymose Hywel Bennett making an early career. I remember this clip being on a TV show called Addicts that you used to tune into to hope for lots of fun celebratory insights into old television, but actually, my computer's just fallen on me. That's the ghost of Noel Edmonds, who isn't actually dead, throwing things at me. I used to get, again, I was so serious, I used to get so offended on behalf of the programme makers who made brilliant old telly, whose out of context clips were mocked by Noel Edmonds. But Telly Addicts was a good source of old clips, and they showed this as a, whose early break was it? And I think the person answered, William Hartnell, and Noel Edmonds was like, well, no, it is William Hartnell, but that's not who we're asking about, because he played Doctor Who. It was Hywel Bennett. So Hywel Bennett did well enough to be well known enough to be an answer in a question about sort of before they were famous. They're trying to do alien body acting, which is laudable. And they're both good actors. Ian Thompson, who plays the other one, is a fine actor, still around, still represented by a very good agent, which means that I've never been able to penetrate to his inner sanctum, but also played the Optera Hetra in the Web Planet. This guy, Al Raymond, the third Aridian, I've never found. So if your next door neighbour is going, I was in Doctor Who once, I played a talking fish who blew up a planet, that's a good shot. That the explosion is very well suggested there, with a mixture of, I presume, stock footage, a clever film shot, and then a cut to studio. That was actually quite well done. If your neighbour says, yeah, I was an arsonist fish person in a Doctor Who, it was all live, Don't write in, I know it wasn't live, but a lot of people who were in it at the time tell me it was. I'd forgotten she treads on a dead Maya beast. Gosh. Ian Thompson, Family at War, he did, which was a great show, and he's very, very good in it. Richard Martin saddled him with the Optera costume and then the Aridian leotard. Oh, Hywel Bennett's doing some sort of digging acting there. I don't know quite. Sort of slightly moving the sand, but he's doing something. Hywel Bennett was a fine actor with a gorgeous voice, who and a beautiful face. He was a very handsome young man who then turned up in EastEnders many years later, having obviously enjoyed himself in the pub quite often, and those sort of beautiful young features had sort of turned into puffy, baggy character. But of course, because he had the voice, he had a fantastic voice. He probably, and I did hear this. He sent signed photos to a friend of mine, so obviously wasn't totally dismissive of the whole Doctor Who thing and the whole being approached thing. But I did hear tell that people who encountered him at his local pub or whatever, he'd be outside. He was quite a committed man of the cups, shall we say? And I say that as I'm not making light of that. I say that as somebody who has been in that boat, and you never quite get out of that boat. But I'm currently docked. I'm currently moored. What are they eating? They're eating some sort of lump of something. I like it when they have a funny pen or a funny breakfast or something that's sort of space pen or space breakfast. It always shows a bit of effort. These are interesting sets, these catacombs. But yeah, of Hywel Bennett sort of sitting outside, drinking. And if anyone ever went up to him and said, "Excuse me, are you Hywel Bennett?" You go, "Go away." He wouldn't. It would be a word beginning with F and a word beginning with off, which I'm going to try not to swear on these, just because for me, swearing and Doctor Who don't go together. It's very old-fashioned of me, I know, but if there is some young people like Doctor Who and they might sit through this nonsense, and if they do, I don't want them to hear me effing and jeffing. They're very sad, the Aridians, aren't they? But you would be if you lived on a planet that is very arid, that some fool had christened arid before, because it became arid. We hear from that story of it becoming arid. So was it called Aridius before it became arid? Which suggests a certain self-fulfilling prophecy. What is it? Nominative determinism. Although we are called Earth, and it's what it's made of. Although I suppose it should be called 90% water / Earth. Yeah, and William Hartnell's very good here. He accepts that these they are rather sad. They're so sad they seem like they're crying all the time, which could solve their aridity problems. Just keep being sad, and you will fill the world with an ocean of your tears. They haven't quite got, there's no credit for fish movement by Rosalind de Winter, but there is an attempt to suggest alien body language and speech patterns, which he works so well in close-up, doesn't he, Hartnell? Look at that. That's a terrific shot. Which, although it doesn't always come off, I think is laudable. I prefer you to have a go at that than just to, be a person in a suit, but otherwise your body language and your speech patterns are, you may as well be in a shop. That's a bit mean. But and of course, the Daleks are Nazis, and they, put prisoners to labour, and then they shoot them, and it's a slightly clumsy sequence that we didn't really see much of it. I don't know what the camera's doing. We have these sort of cameras at ground level, so we see Dalek skirts and people's feet, but the TARDIS being indestructible is a lovely, comforting thing, and I love the statement that makes, this ramshackle, rackety thing that that looks like a police box, for all its faults, and can never quite go where you want it to go. For all its faults, it's indestructible, and I feel a bit. That makes me feel slightly patriotic. I'm not a tub thumping jingoist, but I see this country as sort of punching above its weight. It's slightly ramshackle. It's a bit of a mess, but and it can look a bit clumsy, but it's indestructible. It does more than you would expect it to do, and yet whilst it does it has a sort of ramshackle charm about it. That's if you were to sum up what I like about this country and being British, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and there are many things I think are wrong, but also I think we knock ourselves. Oh, there's a boom mic. We knock ourselves quite a lot, but there's nothing wrong with trying to accentuate your positives as well. Doesn't mean you're, as I say, jingoistic. And I don't like jingoism and blind patriotism. That's very dangerous. But I think it's all right to go, sometimes we're all right. We do our best. Hartnell's really good in this. He is accepting that they have no choice. He's pragmatic. He's cold, but he's not being aloof. He's not being angry with them. He knows they've got to do what they've got to do, and he's not going to forgive them, but he's also not going to have a go at them. And do you know, one of these Aridians gets eaten by the Maya beast later on, and I've never managed to, and I've never looked it up either. I've never managed to work out which one it is. I wonder if I will be able to work it out this time. Probably not. I mean, I miss so much because the nature of this means I have to keep talking. Anyway, so plot-wise, what it means is that in these, stories, that it's actually more about, what location are we in this week. The storylines have to be fairly simple, and this is a fairly straightforward one. If they meet some benign aliens who nonetheless are, cowed by the Daleks and forced to cooperate with the Daleks in order to hand over the time travelers. And that's pretty much the story of the week. But what it means is we get a different race of Doctor Who aliens, too, because we get the Maya beasts. This is a really good set. I'd forgotten, actually, how good some of these sets are, because, again, they're not sets that last more than a week, and some of the outside sets aren't great, but these catacombs, they've got depth, and there's an attempt to do stalagmites/tights, and you've got enough depth to have the Aridians in the background to give it a bit of a sense of scale. And it's always nice to see an alien on screen in Doctor Who. Although these ones do sort of wander around being a bit lost, don't they? I'm sorry. What are they saying to each other? No idea. Oh, yeah, okay. Are they gold? I think they're probably gold, are they? I'd like to see some colour pictures. I mean, not that they're obviously men in leotards, but it's... so who is it that gets... So who's the one that gets... Who does get eaten? One of them gets eaten here, trying to rescue... Is it Hywel Bennett? Does Hywel Bennett get eaten? We don't actually see. I'm sure it's in the script, but I've never looked at the script. And I'm sure it's in the book. And I don't think I've got the book, because it was one of the later books, wasn't it? My Target collection has a couple of gaps. And that's pretty... He's just ingested. The Maya Beast has just ingested alive Rinian or Prondin, or... They're all called things like that, aren't they? The Aridians. And so it's nighttime on Aridius, which, as I say, there's a shot. That's nice, though, the night sky above Ian. Nighttime is always atmospheric. Malsan is what Ian Thompson's called. Malsan, Rinian and Prondin, and Walk on Aridian. That wasn't on his CV. It's like, can you give me a name? Can't you call me Walkondin? Walkondin, that's what he's called from now on. Walkondin. Brian Proudfoot. Oh, look at them. They gleam in the studio light. They look fantastic. Something the Beatles reminded me of a very witty friend of mine. I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Jim Smith. I've got lots of people I've met only a handful of times, but I, then consort with on social media. And there are some very funny and very inventive and creative people in the world of Doctor Who, Darrell among them. And I sometimes feel a bit like I've got away with something because I did my one-man show of I seem to, get various bits of work. I'm very lucky for being the funny Doctor Who guy. And there are lots of funny Doctor Who guys out there who are suppliers of great entertainment and insight on social media. And I remember sort of getting annoyed with somebody being. I had a whole running joke in a show that I actually cut out, and I would like to do something with it eventually. I named this person Barry, who's the guy that whenever anybody does something to do with Doctor Who, he updates their Wikipedia page. So, Abraham Lincoln was the president of the United States who is best known for appearing in episode 1 of The Chase. And because there are some actors who've had great careers who, if they've been in Doctor Who, that is in their list of 2 or 3 things that they've done on Wikipedia, even if their contribution to Doctor Who is minor, and it doesn't mention, say, them being an associate artist of the Royal Shakespeare Company or whatever, because Doctor Who fans sort of, we still have that thing, and I understand the drive, because I was I very much, certainly when I was younger, the idea that the outside world had to have Doctor Who communicated to it, and Doctor Who's importance had to be underlined. And I was talking about this online somewhere, and I think it was Jim Smith, but yeah, Paul the Executioner's McCartney, which, the idea that the Beatles, among the things that they were best known for, was appearing in episode 1 of The Chase. And this is the sort of thing. This is sort of boys' own adventure stuff. Building a sort of a fake floor, a hidden entrance for something to tumble through. This was the sort of thing you read about in adventure stories. That's actually, I think, harder to do in real life than it is on telly. Oh yes, and so yeah. So this is going to lead to a shot that has been treated on this DVD, that in the original, because filming at night is so expensive, the studio we are at nighttime and the film sequence was in the day, and the jar between studio and film was even more pronounced. Here is the shot, is even more pronounced. It's great. But not on this DVD where they've darkened it. On the original, it's in day. Oh, Ian, he's quite tough, isn't he? And this sometimes opens up the debate about what is restoration and what is tinkering. And I am great friends with the restoration team, and I have this chat in pubs. And when I speak to my friend who does the picture restoration, he makes for a very convincing case for, well, if you want it as is original, we wouldn't. You would have less of the film picture because they actually pull out and show us a bit more than you would have actually seen, because of the way stuff was cropped in on the film recordings and various ways. So he sort of said, we'll never get it as it was broadcast. But we can do things to it to make it look as good as possible, and that includes perhaps tinting a shot that was never tinted. For me, as somebody who's a bit of an archaeologist, and I mean, I was wrong, but I was a bit dubious about Vidfire, because I was introduced to Doctor Who as scrappy old Phil prints, and that to me gave it part of its atmosphere. Obviously it looks closer to original broadcast with Vidfire, and it looks better, but of course I was comforted by the thing that was familiar. I hold my hands up, and I was wrong with that, and I think Vidfire is absolutely the right thing to do. The darkening of the thing, I think I would prefer it to look like it did when it was broadcast, but I totally understand the other argument. I also see no need for anger to be directed at anybody, because I think there are valid arguments either way. But, as I say, given my choice, even though I work very closely with, and in fact because of, the guys on the restoration team, who I all admire and like very much, I personally would prefer, and I remember being so cross with that shot, going, he's Richard Martin again, being really lazy. But it's a really good shot. It just doesn't marry with the studio, and that matches the technology that they had at the time and what they did at the time. So I think it should be there, warts and all. But it's because yeah. Anyway, I think that's enough on that. What is my favourite thing for episode 2? Oh gosh, I think, and I'm sure Darrell isn't going to choose this, because I think we perhaps watch these things with a slightly different eye, which is okay. I was going to say perhaps it's the ruthlessness of the Daleks and their execution of those prisoners, but that was, I thought, slightly bungled in the shooting. I'm actually going to say William Hartnell's performance, because throughout the whole thing, his energy he's not doing an awful lot, but there's a sort of simmering danger there, which is not something we always see and associate with him. And I think William Hartnell's always great and always interested, but I think we saw a dimension of him there that we don't always see, and it particularly struck me this time. So although I'm not always going to choose the Doctor, I don't think that's a cheat to go, an actor doing a thing, because I think Hartnell moulded his performance to the circumstances, and it helped to tell that story of the Aridians who were, forced to cooperate with the Daleks under threat of death, and the Doctor sort of accepts that whilst, realising that it has mortal consequences for the TARDIS crew, and he brings a lot of weight and gravity to that. What is Darrell going to say?
Reason two that I love The Chase is its 60s-ness. There is no other 60s story that is as 60s as The Chase is. People forget now that in the early 90s there was a big 1960s revival just before Britpop started. There were a lot of old black and white TV shows and music being re-released. So there was the Monkees and Batman and Star Trek on TV, and there was the Beatles anthology. And The Chase came out on video in that era as well. I think it was 1993 for the 30th anniversary. So that's actually tied in to that whole nostalgia. But when I was about 7 or 8 during that period, so I'm quite fondly predisposed to anything that's very kind of pure 60s, and The Chase is absolutely full of that. I think it's fair to say that The Chase is the most indicative of Dalek mania. It's the Dalek mania story. There's the Peter Cushing films at the cinema, but more so than Dalek Invasion of Earth, more so than Dalek's Master Plan, The Chase is on TV, the Dalek mania story. And I love it for it. It's so evocative of that moment in time when everybody knew what a Dalek was and everyone was making Dalek jokes. And what better Dalek joke than The Chase? There's something about this story which feels so much of its time that it's just like a time machine in itself. You watch that story, you are in 1965, just as much as listening to, Please Please Me or watching Batman or the Monkees. You are in that moment right there, and that's why I love The Chase. It's like my own personal time machine to the 60s.
Now, you see, that's a really good reason. I don't think he's doing episode-specific reasons, which is fine. That sort of instruction is that everybody's to... Because sometimes people have said, can I clarify what you want? And I've sort of gone, I want you, because I think we sometimes need reminding, especially when we see the sometimes madness and unkindness of Doctor Who fans on social media, that actually it's at its best and actually at its most typical, because the loudest voices are often the meanest and ones who've got fewest things to do. At its best, Doctor Who fandom is creative and exciting and funny. And once again, I go, I like William Hartnell's performance. And you've got somebody there encapsulating it so much more eloquently, and I think that's a really interesting take. And it terrifies me that actually everybody's take on Doctor Who is far more interesting than mine. But in a way, isn't it nice, therefore, that amongst a sea of my nonsense, there's a little lighthouse of intellectualism and wit provided by somebody else. Yeah, that's great. I like the idea of the chase being a very 60s Doctor Who story, and it is the sort of cigarette card of Doctor Who TV, isn't it? Which and as Darrell's other choice showed, the production can't always live up to. You do wonder if Terry Nation's ever seen Doctor Who, but again, in those days, audiences knew that what was being done was sometimes a suggestion rather than a literal rendition. I'm enjoying myself. I could have been lying in bed scrolling through terrible news and people yelling at each other. Instead, I'm watching sad aliens and moments of greatness and moments of silliness. That's Doctor Who in a nutshell, isn't it? Moments of greatness and moments of silliness. There'll be more of both, I'm sure, in the next edition, but I hope you're in a happy time and place. I am, and maybe next time, if you're not, we'll do our best to take you to one. I can't guarantee that the sets will be particularly good because you'll only be with me for a week, but I'll do my best not to wobble too much. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Toby. Stay safe, be kind. Ta-ta. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest this time around was Darrell Maclaine, who can be found on Twitter at MacLockdown, MAC Lockdown, and is well worth a follow. I'd like to thank this episode's featured patrons, who are Ruben Herfindahl, Rob Leonard, Stephen Moffat, Richard Straw, Jenny at Bluebox99, Paul Cook, Rob Dawson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Siobhan Galichon, Ian Key, Joe Llewellyn, Darren Mackay, Stewie the Bunts, Andrew, Luke Adkins, Pete Adamson, Will Brooks, Rick Byatt, Paul Carrington, Andy Case, John Curley, Ian Gillespie, James Gould, Lisa C. Greco, Dave Hoskin, Andrew Jordan, Guy Lambert, and James Lark. The music for this podcast is specially composed by Dave Gates. If you'd like to add your name to that illustrious and very generous list, please sign up and subscribe at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, or you can do a one-off payment at kofi.com/Toby Hadoke. All support is very much appreciated. Failing that, please do rate and review these at all podcast outlets. That really helps. Every Tuesday I do live comedy on Twitch TV/XS Malarkey. That's my long-running weekly comedy club where I have 4 special guests from around the world doing stand-up.